So my name is Min. I was asked to speak about Africa innovation, and I can definitely speak for Mauritius innovation. I don't think I have enough context to talk about Africa, but I wanted to share some stories and insights, at least from Mauritius, to see how we could apply that into a broader context. So I thought I would start where a lot of you guys are. So I am originally from Singapore, and I did my university in Singapore as well. And in the third year of my university, I was very lucky to land an exchange program in Stanford University, right in the heart of Silicon Valley. And this was a place where I remember walking into my first lecture, and it was Professor Steve Blank. Some of you might know that name from customer development and lean startup. So he was in class and he said, you guys are already at Stanford. If you get anything more than an A, you're probably missing out on other things in life. And what he was talking about was things like that, right? This is a very common scene in the middle of the Bay Area. You have, young founders pitching to investors on the left. And incidentally, this is Paul Graham. He's the godfather of startup investing. He started Y Combinator that has spun out platforms like Airbnb, like Reddit, like Dropbox. They all came from Y Combinator. And you would see scenes like that everywhere, on campus, in coffee shops, on a hike, and even on stage. And I remember this one conversation very, very clearly. This was startup school. And you had two girls here from Stanford majoring in computer science, pitching their new idea to Paul Graham, right? This was about 10 years ago, was for a booking engine that would help people find experiences online on Facebook. So if you're a yoga instructor, if you provide walking tours, you could go on Facebook and you could book them, right? So it was a usual exchange. Paul Graham was asking them a lot of questions about strategy, about their go-to-market, typical questions. And then at the end, he said, this is a great idea, but is this really the biggest problem in the world you can think about, getting people to buy experiences? And he basically said that, if you do a startup, you're going to do it for the next 5 years. It's better to do something hard if you're capable of doing hard things. And this is really the DNA of what makes Silicon Valley the place it is. It's people just wanting to tackle the most impossible problems. And because of the size of their ambition, you have ideas that go global. I'm not only talking about tech, we're talking about activism, we're talking about thought leadership, we're talking about science, but people love tackling the hardest problems in the world. And there were so many incidents of this where, we are in a business plan competition and you have the VCs there, the venture capitalists there, looking at these pitches and saying, you have the perfect business plan. I can't find any technical faults in your business plan. But you know what? You guys are just not the ones to do it. And you're like, okay, so what do I do, right? And so this is the environment that I was really trained in innovation and startups, which is to tackle difficult things. And after 7 years, of this environment, I was interning at a startup, a high growth startup. It eventually got bought out by Quick. What we were building was basically it was the FaceTime before FaceTime for all the Nokia phones, right? So you could actually live video stream on very, very basic phones. And, Skype basically bought that technology that's now powering Skype today. So, coming from that context, and, we never planned this. I really appreciate Jared's introduction on platforms this morning, because I love platforms, technical and technology platforms and non-technology platforms. And, platforms are really the heart of what I think has massive potential for change. And, 7 years later, I met my husband, who is Mauritian, but was living in the US at the time. And we decided, hey, with everything we've learned, could we tackle some hard problems, right, around the world? And so we decided to come back to Mauritius because it was really the perfect lab to experiment on some of these ideas. I think a lot of Jared's context came from platforms like we see Facebook, Airbnb. They're massive, they're huge, they're global, and there are ethical issues that have come up. And I would say from being on the ground, there was actually a shift for me in 2012, where everyone in Silicon Valley who had lived there, for generations, they said that the Wall Street energy had come to Silicon Valley. right? Silicon Valley used to be about tackling the most impossible problems in defense, in education, in science. And suddenly when the Wall Street money came there, it was all about valuations, it was about advertising, right? The best brains in the world was spent on decoding, how can I get you to click on this ad, right? To make more money for the company. So I myself felt that shift in energy, and that's why we said, hey, you know what, let's use everything we love about, Silicon Valley, the innovation, the creativity, the ambition, and let's apply it somewhere else. And we chose Mauritius because it's a perfect lab, to start something and see how it plays out on a country level. As some of you might know, Mauritius is really, really small off the Indian Ocean. It has only 1.3 million people, probably like a small town in some of your countries. But it has a diverse culture. Africans, Chinese, Europeans, a very, very interesting mix. And it's very easy to set up business, high internet connectivity, and a lot of opportunities for sustainable development. Okay. To give you some context though, when we came back 5 years ago into Mauritius, a lot of the conversation was around, okay, Mauritius is 50 years old, very young country, but Mauritius economy is stuck in second gear. We've been a middle income country for so many years. What is going to be the next driver of growth? And to give you some context, if you come to Mauritius, you will see amazing green fields of sugarcane and blue skies. And that was because in the 1970s, the biggest export for Mauritius was sugarcane, right, was sugar. And after that, it was manufacturing and textiles, and then it went into services. And today, it's a very diversified economy of financial services, IT, and the port. But although I say this, a lot of the Mauritian service industry is actually on what they call BPO, right? Business processing. It's back-end operations. It's not the front end of value creation and growth. And so we are still seeing like a question, like where is Mauritius growth going to come from? And our bet was, could it be from a knowledge economy? Could we systematically build a knowledge economy for Mauritius? And to give you a scale of this, right? I know Jared spoke about platforms, $2.2 trillion. This is the economy of Mauritius, 14 billion of the whole country. And a single startup, Uber, is 75 billion, about 4 to 5 times the economy of Mauritius, right? So when I first came, I got very, very interested in a lot of social issues, right? Everyone is saying, nonprofit sector, we need more money for education, for health. There's a problem with drugs, but like, where's the money going to come from? And our hypothesis was that the economy of Mauritius is just too small, right? It's not sustainable. And could platforms actually change that? So we decided to start a little experiment. We started an innovation consultancy called Reddot. And Reddot was inspired by Singapore because Singapore is a very, very small point on the map. It's so small that the entire word Singapore covers the size of the country, right? And so it's really a representation for how a small little place or a small little team could actually have massive impact. And with Reddot, we have 7 of us now in the team. We usually meet by Zoom. And although we have 7 people, the strength of innovation is really multiplied because we work with organizations, private, government, and nonprofits to work on innovative solutions and also businesses for tomorrow. And how we usually start is we go to the CEO to find a board level challenge, right? What is a challenge that the company at the board level is thinking about that seems impossible to solve and that's very, very complex? And we try and reframe that into a way that fits into the Red Dot's 6 guiding principles. All the projects we work on, first, we ensure that there is social impact being generated. 2, it must be highly scalable through a combined use of technology and community building. 3, it must build capacity in the organization that we work with, and that's how we build, consistent knowledge economy skills. 4, it must break down the silos within companies or within the people, private and government sectors to start connecting the dots, right? Let's start looking at how data sets can be combined, how collaborations can be built. And through that, how do we grow an entire pie? How do we grow an entire industry? And finally, how do we change the game, right? How do we change the game, have new rules, have behavior change, have change in paradigms? Okay, so it's really exciting work. And one of the recent things that we have launched is Punch. So Punch is a platform that we collaborated with the largest bank, Mauritius Commercial Bank in Mauritius, to really promote the growth of SMEs. And the big challenge that they had was, okay, it's post-COVID, SMEs are struggling. Some of them might even need to completely pivot, right? But they might not have the collateral, they might not have the business plan to be able to raise funds, either a loan or equity financing. And so we came in and we said, hey, why don't we start a multi-sided marketplace around the entrepreneur at the center and forget about the old business plan, right? But let's chart a new version of a growth plan, connect them with growth partners, right? So service providers, they could be KPMG, they could be, Reddot for innovation, it could be digital marketing, but how do we connect them with service providers that can execute on a growth strategy and investors that can fund their growth strategy, right? And systematically create a growth plan, right, for SMEs. This was a really, really exciting project we just launched. And for me, what was very meaningful about this was it really changes the relationship banks have with entrepreneurs, right? And many times in SME banking, you go to a banker, he's like, judging your books, and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't lend you money. Now the conversation changes, says, yes, we're always there for you, but let's talk about growth. It aligns every single actor, in the vision of SME growth. Okay. The second project I want to talk about, this is really close to my heart, it's called Kaza Care. And this again was heightened, with the COVID pandemic and the lockdown, where you realize, especially if you're an elderly person, if you're immunocompromised, if you have chronic diseases, you're isolated, you might be a lot more vulnerable, and there's no infrastructure for home care in Mauritius. Right, so we started Mauritius' first home care platform where you can get a personal carer if your mom is frail. You can get nursing care so that you don't have to visit the hospital. You can get a personal assistant, to help you get groceries, or you can even get, the wellness and therapy services like physiotherapy, help from psychologists, all in your home, right? So it's really a one-stop platform to bring all these services together to support, especially an aging population, where 25% of Mauritians will be above 60 years old in 10 years, right? It's not a small size of the market. So I wanted to share this, this example, because for me, if you look at just elder care or home care platforms, there are a dime a dozen out there, right? And if you look at a lot of these platforms, they are based on a very, very Western context, okay? And I want to share a story because a lot of this thinking and inspiration came from our medical advisor. His name is Ephraim, and he happens to be from Ethiopia, now living in Netherlands, right? And why I really, really connected with him is that he has seen, the African system of elder care and the Netherlands system of elder care, and they are two completely contrasting systems, right? The first insight I gained from him was that when you're young, right? I mean, all of you on this call, if you're sick, you go in and out of the hospital, you get treated and you're healed, right? So the healthcare is episodic, you go in and out of hospital. But if you have a chronic disease or if you are aged and you have multiple diagnoses, you need to shift from an episodic care model to a continuum of care model where your health should be continuously monitored and managed, right? And especially when you get older, you're now looking at multiple domains of health, right? So we have a typical patient, he's diabetic, maybe Alzheimer's, right? Maybe at a fall, and suddenly he's taking 8 medications, juggling between that, seeing a podiatrist, a neurologist, a family doctor, and the entire care experience is extremely fragmented, right? So the first insight for us was, how do we move from an episodic care model to a continuum of care model? And if we could do that for elders, we could do it for everyone else, right? The second insight for me was really where I want to talk about African innovation and why I think there's really a space for the context of Africa to create a completely new model of care for the world. And that is that, if you come from Africa or Asia, you know that most caregivers are family members. They are not professional paid caregivers. There's a neighbor that you just asked to take care of your mom. There's an aunt, who quit her job to suddenly take care of the whole village. Like, it's a very communal model of care. And so we realized, the challenge was then, how do you democratize high quality care and empower family caregivers to deliver a higher level of care with technology, with training, and etc. That was the second insight. And the third insight was that if you happen to be from a very, very rich country like the Netherlands or Singapore, healthcare has a frame of you are sick and you need to be fixed. Every small thing you have, let's go fix it, right? But when you're living in a country, even Mauritius, right, where affordability is a challenge and healthcare is not as sophisticated, the strategy for healthcare needs to shift from fixing to actually coping, right? And this lends very, very well to aging care, aged care, which is at a certain point, you cannot be healed from a chronic disease. The more you adapt and cope with it, and there are many, many coping strategies that are non-medical in nature, you can actually have an excellent quality of life, right? While being in a wheelchair, you can have excellent quality of life while being diabetic. And how do you shift that healthcare model towards coping, right? So I wanted to present this exact example because for me, I really don't believe in a cut and paste model of innovation. It must be very, very context specific. And I think there's immense power for platforms for an African context to really solve problems at scale. Okay. The last example I'm going to show you is one of our fun projects. So on the side of our commercial, serious projects, different people do different projects for fun. Some of them are events like Fuck Up Nights, where we try and change the culture of failure in Mauritius. Some of them are, movements to put more women on boards, right, in Mauritius. And some of them are actually platforms like, Teaching 2.0, which was a way to get more teachers to be able to teach online, right, during the COVID pandemic. But there's one example I really want to zoom into, which is something we started during the lockdown, which was COVID Watch in Mauritius. This happened in March of 2020, where, Mauritius had its first case of COVID. And this was created to solve a problem I personally had. The first problem was that all the news was in French and Creole, which I completely don't understand. And the news was coming all over the place. There was no press conference, different newspapers were picking things up, it was incomplete reporting. And I was like, okay, I need to translate it and know it anyway. So let me just start collating, right, all the news in English. So it was one place where we started tracking the official numbers that were reported. We were the first ones who created a graph, so you could actually see trends of whether cases were going up or staying the same. We had a section for important updates. If you remember last year in March, every single day there was a new rule change, right? It was a change around groceries, and then there's a new grant somewhere, and then this can open and that can't. So every day there were new rules that we were updating. And it became an entire archive of Mauritius strategy for COVID prevention and reporting in one place. And out of this, there was one day where the government suddenly announced that there will be a complete lockdown and all supermarkets would be closed in the next few hours, right? And immediately there was a frenzy on Facebook. Everyone was saying, hey, I didn't get my groceries. Where can I get them? And so we said, hey, you know what? Let's start a Google Sheet where everyone would list all the groceries and, everything that was available. In real time, people would actually put whether they are up or out of stock or the site is down because of overload, the links. And this was, at the time it was active, we had about 50 to 100 people kind of just changing things in real time, helping other people get food, right? And then we looked at the data and we realized some people are writing to us saying, hey, this site's great, but I don't have a computer. And on the phone, it's like incredibly hard to access. And so we turn it into an app. And this is actually done in 5 minutes on a no-code platform. For those of you who are not technical, please check out the no-code movement, where anyone without writing a single line of code can turn a Google Sheet into an app in 5 minutes, right? And I wanted to show you this just to demonstrate how easy it is. You really do not need to be someone technical to get started on, using technology for social good, right? So, the theme I that I saw, in today's conference was, how do you find your digital mission, right? And if I draw back to the 3 stories I shared, the first one for me that's so important is, what are your guiding principles? Especially in the era of technology, right? You can go in so many places. And, to share a very personal example, the whole reason why Red Dot came up with 6 guiding principles is that if we didn't, we'll be put all over the place, right? If you tell people you're an innovation consultancy, you'll be asked to install ERPs, you'll be asked to provide innovation training, you'll be asked to look at customer experience, and you need to basically guide others on how they want to engage with you, right? So with any problem out there, what are your guiding principles that would govern how you choose your projects? What's the DNA of your projects, right? That makes it you. What are your guiding principles? Number 2, what problem or problems are you really curious about? I'm kind of I don't really agree with the whole follow your passion model. I think there are only a small section of people who knew they wanted to be something when they were 8 years old. But I think for the rest of us, I think it's a lot easier to start with problems. And, from what I know about ALU students, I think execution is something you guys do really, really well. I think where the attention needs to go more into is the awareness of problems, because how you frame the problem will automatically determine the solution, right? If we had framed elder care as an affordability issue, it would be really different. If we framed it as a skill issue, it would be very different. If we framed it as a collaboration issue, it'd be very different, right? So how do you actually, talk to everyone, talk to as many people as you can, right, about the problem, to get multi-dimension awareness about the problem, and then decide where's the gap, right? Don't do what others are already doing. Like, what is your position on this problem that really makes it unique? Yeah. And the last one is, just start small. I've learned to believe that you have everything you need to get started. I mean, there's nothing you lack. And you can build stuff without money, you can build stuff without code. There's so much that you can do, that you can experiment. And there's a lot of money out there, there's a lot of funding out there looking for great projects, right? If you can prove that with the little that you have done, you have 10,000 users, you have evidence of impact, funding will definitely flow. Right? So it's to start a small experiment, look at the data, let it guide you. You don't need to think so far, just start, right? Just start small. The last thing I will end off with is a really nice quote that I got from a wisdom elder. And especially in this time when technology is just everywhere, right? I think the more important it is for us to just be quiet, to just step back and really understand what we stand for. Because if you don't stand for anything, you fall for everything, right? And I think that balance between being always connected and just stepping back and saying, this is who I am, right, will be an important place to start. And with that, I think I'm done. Thank you so much.